Well, good morning. This is Barry Odell with the Church of Christ at Mammoth Spring Facebook page. I want to welcome everybody to today's live stream on the book of Revelation. And we're ready for Revelation chapter 15 today, so I hope you have your Bibles with you and are ready to study. Good morning, Anita and Connie. Hope you guys are doing well. All right, we are in the midst here of... Good morning, Margaret. We are in the midst of the battle between the dragon and the lamb. We are not too far from the end of the story as we continue our study. Revelation chapter 15 is a rather short chapter. It's only 8 verses long, so this video will not be as long today. Good morning, Lyle and Sheila. Hope you guys are doing well. So we looked yesterday at Revelation chapter 14, and we had the two sides clearly marked. We had the 144,000, and then we had the mention of those who worship the beast and his image in verse 7. Hey, okay, Roger's watching too. Good morning, Roger, and Anita. And this distinction has been drawn throughout the study of the book of Revelation, that the Lamb and his side is being harassed and at times feels like being defeated by the dragon and his allies. Good morning, Wayne. Good morning, Barry. And when you look at the text, especially what we were looking at in chapter 12 and verse 11, it does appear at times, as it says there in Revelation 12:11, they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb, that sometimes that victory was in question because there was power given to the beast to persecute and to seemingly triumph over the Lamb and his people. But we, of course, know that that's not going to happen. So chapter 15 is just a part of this narrative. Let me pull up the outline here, and we will get started. So this is, again, another of John's series of visions. And I think it's interesting. I mentioned this in one of the videos. I don't remember which one it was. But, we're never given any indication as to how long this series of visions takes. Is it a matter of hours? Is it a matter of days or weeks? We just don't know. But it is, regardless of how long this revelation is taking place in John's world, it's a continued story. We have to keep that in mind. It's a continued thought. But throughout the continuous thought, there are a variety of signs. And so as you open to chapter 15, you have that again. There's another sign, and notice the location of this sign. It's in heaven. So in heaven, great and marvelous, 7 angels having 7 last plagues. All right, so we've already talked about the number 7. We've had the 7 angels. We've had the 7 seals. We've had the 7 trumpets. Now we have 7 other angels, and they are going to have 7 last plagues. Good morning, Charles. Good to see you on here this morning. So, again, that number 7 is extremely important throughout the book of Revelation. 7 angels having the 7 last plagues, for in them the wrath of God is complete. Well, the wrath of God is being worked out or displayed, if you will, against Babylon, which is, of course, figuratively speaking, of Rome. I saw something like a sea of glass mingled with fire. And again, this vision or this sign, verse 1, is in heaven. So in heaven, this sign, he sees a sea of glass with fire, mingled with fire, and those who have the victory over the beast, over his image and over his mark and over the number of his name. And of course, the number of the beast, we looked at that at the end of chapter 13. It's everything that is short of the divine. It is a man, the number of a man. But they are standing on the sea of glass, those who have the victory, on the sea of glass, having harps of God. They sing the song of Moses, the servant of God, and the song of the Lamb. So the song of Moses, this is just yet another one of those allusions to an Old Testament text. The Song of Moses is actually recorded in Exodus chapter 15. Of course, in Exodus chapter 12, you have the Passover feast, you have the 10th plague, and you have the deliverance of Israel out of Egypt. As they are delivered, I guess you'd say geographically from Egypt, they are then cornered by the Egyptians at the Red Sea, but they are permitted to cross the Red Sea. God opens the sea for them, and after the Egyptians are destroyed in the sea, you have the Song of Moses. And we're not going to go read that, but you can read all of Exodus chapter 15. The first 18 verses there are the record of the song of Moses and the Israelites. And then after that, Miriam and the women had a song that they sang too. So again, just another allusion to your Old Testament. Good morning, Brian. Glad to see you on here today. So that's what we're talking about today. The song of Moses and the Lamb. Again, a song of victory. Great and marvelous are your works, Lord God Almighty. Just and true are your ways, O King of the saints. Who shall not fear you, O Lord, and glorify your name? You know, in view of everything that's being recorded here in the book of Revelation, and everything that God is doing on behalf of his people through the Lamb, who wouldn't glorify God? That's a natural response, I think, for God's people. For you alone are holy. For all nations shall come and worship before you, for your judgments have been manifested. And I think that's important there to understand the last phrase of verse 4. Your judgments have been manifested. Well, now they're being revealed to these 7 churches of Asia. You know, things that I always think of the book of Job when I think of something like this. You know, Job was completely unaware of the meeting that took place in heaven. It's recorded in Job chapter 1, I think it's verses 5 and 6, and then over in Job chapter 2. He had no idea that was taking place. He didn't know the workings of God, if you will, and the permission that God gave to Satan. And the fact of the matter is, as we read the book of Job, you know, we have the complete account, but as we read the book of Job, and when God starts answering Job in chapter 38, he never answers all of the questions that Job had throughout that entire text. But when we look at the book of Revelation, your judgments have been manifested. God is plainly revealing himself here to these 7 churches of Asia, and in turn to us about his will being accomplished and his people being vindicated. So verses 1 through 4, you have the victorious saints rejoicing in heaven. So I put a couple things in your outline here. This fiery glass, this sea that's mingled with fire that we read about in verse 2. I've referenced 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 6 and 7. It talks about the fiery trial that those Christians were enduring. Well, them standing on a fiery glass may represent the concept of them having overcome. They're standing on top. The song of Moses and the Lamb, God's 2 lawgivers. Of course, Moses was, it's recorded in Deuteronomy 18, but he prophesied of another prophet who would come after him. And of course, in Acts chapter 3, I think it is, that prophecy is shown to be fulfilled in Jesus. So this song links the redeemed of all ages, the redeemed under the Mosaic dispensation and the redeemed under the law of Christ, which is, for the first century, it'd be these 7 churches of Asia and other Christians, but that comes all the way down to us today as well. So then we have verses 5 through 8. God is ready to pour out his wrath. So the victory has already been determined. All right, it's being pictured for us throughout these chapters, but the end result is already known by God. And so he's getting ready to pour out, or to manifest even further, as it says in verse 4, his wrath that's going to be poured out on his enemies. So after these things I looked, and behold, the temple of the tabernacle of the testimony in heaven was open. All right, what is the temple of the tabernacle of the testimony? Well, the temple of the tabernacle would be the inner sanctuary of what we would call the tabernacle, or what would become the temple. This is the most holy place. All right, this is where God would meet with the high priest once a year. This is when the tabernacle was constructed, everything was set up. It's recorded in Exodus 40, where the presence of God came and filled the place with smoke, and everybody had to get out. We're actually going to look at that here in just a minute. The way to God is opened up. And of course, it's opened up through Christ. It's not opened up through Caesar. It's not opened up through Roman power. It's opened up in heaven. And out of the temple came the 7 angels having the 7 plagues. So their source then is God himself. The things that are getting ready to be described, God is the source of them. Notice how they're dressed. Clothed in pure, bright linen. All right? Pure and bright. Holiness. And having their chest girded with a golden band. And this is the idea. We see this back in chapter 1 in the description of Jesus. This is the concept of a judicial robe. They're coming in judgment, all right, from God. Then one of the 4 living creatures gave to the 7 angels 7 golden bowls full of the wrath of God, who lives forever and ever. The temple was filled with smoke from the glory of God and from his power, and no one was able to enter the temple till the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were completed. Again, this is an announcement of a pure and holy judgment that's coming from God out of heaven, and it's getting ready to be completed. Now, we're not going to get into it today, but chapter 16 reveals all of these 7 bowls being poured out on the earth. But here's what I want to do. So we have this imagery here in verses 5 through 8 of the temple of the tabernacle and smoke filling the place. So I'm going to turn over real quick to Exodus chapter 40. And I mentioned this already, but I want to go ahead and read a couple of verses there just to show you what I was talking about. So beginning in Exodus 25, God gives Moses very specific instructions for the construction of the tabernacle. It's constructed, everything's put together, and it's erected here, and this is what happens. Exodus 40:34. Then the cloud covered the tabernacle of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. And Moses was not able to enter the tabernacle of meeting, because the cloud rested above it, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Whenever the cloud was taken up from above the tabernacle, the children of Israel would go onward in all their journeys. But if the cloud was not taken up, then they did not journey till the day that it was taken up. For the cloud of the Lord was above the tabernacle by day, and fire was over it by night, in the sight of all the house of Israel throughout all their journeys. And I think it's so interesting to note that passage. This represented to them the presence of God. He was with them, whether they were in one location for a brief or an extended period of time, or whether they were on a journey. God was with them. So when I find this back mentioned, going back now to Revelation chapter 15, that John sees this sign in heaven of the temple of the tabernacle of the testimony of heaven, that it's open, and that it's full of the presence of God. The temple, again, Revelation 15:8, the temple was filled with the smoke from the glory of God. That's letting those 7 churches of Asia know, listen, here are some impending judgments, if you will. Chapter 16, these 7 bowls of the wrath of God. But just know, God is with you. The temple, of course, and I've talked about this a few times throughout the book of Revelation, in the New Testament, the church is pictured as the temple. This is the dwelling place of God. I mean, you could go to Ephesians chapter 2 and read verses 19 through 22 and see that fact as well. So this is a very comforting message, Revelation 15 is, to the 7 churches of Asia, that God is with you. His presence is with His temple. He is dwelling among His people in the first century, in Roman persecution. At the end of the first century, He sees and knows what's going on. And He's not going to forsake His people. And I think that's one of those messages, or one of those lessons, if you will, that we today take 2,000 years later from the book of Revelation. Now, we're not looking again for future fulfillments of the book of Revelation and all of these, the Battle of Armageddon, which we haven't got to yet. We will. In some literal physical fulfillment. It's the broader context of the book, that God is with His people, He's aware of what's going on, and He will vindicate their cause. And so Revelation chapter 15 is a very comforting passage. That's what I've got for today. Again, Revelation 15 is only 8 verses, so I don't have to sit here for 30 minutes and run off at the mouth. Chapter 16, though, talks to us about these 7 bowls of the wrath of God that are being poured out. So tomorrow's Friday. I guess we'll have to wait till Monday. I don't usually come in on Fridays. So we'll get to Revelation chapter 16 the next time we're together. I don't see any questions or comments. Let me do this real quick. I don't see any questions or comments in the comment section here. But I appreciate you being on here today. And as always, if you do have any questions or comments when the live stream is over, you can still access this video on our Facebook page. You can go to our YouTube channel, Mammoth Spring Church of Christ. All of this content is there. Thank you, Roger. You have a good weekend too. Connie, have a good weekend. All of you, hope that you do. All right, y'all have a good day, and we will see you on our next video.